Hello, my name is Ed Chapman, and this video cast is going to cover the basic chemistry of life. And we're going to focus in this first part on water molecules and the properties of water molecules, the properties that water has because water is a polar molecule. Alright, the polarity of a water molecule is caused by the fact that the hydrogens and the oxygens don't share electrons equally. Now this bond here is something called a covalent bond, but because the oxygen holds on to the electrons a lot tighter than the hydrogen can, this produces an unequal balance of charge here. So that means the oxygen atom has here near its end a net negative charge. And the hydrogen atoms, because they've lost some of the control of the electron, they have the residual or leftover positive charge. So here in this diagram they're showing that the three atoms that are held together by covalent bonds share the electrons unequally, and this makes the hydrogens weakly positive, communicated here by the green color, and it makes the oxygen weakly negative. And this polarity makes water molecules in a way act like little magnets. They're sticky. They want to hold on to each other. And here we go. We're showing here in yellow the positive, and here in kind of a teal color the negative area of the polar water molecule. Now this stickiness of water means that water molecules are attracted to each other and they want to stick together. They stick together weakly by forming a type of bond called a hydrogen bond, which is what holds water molecules to water molecules. Now this attraction between water molecules is called cohesion, and that means that water molecules are cohesive with each other. These hydrogen bonds can also form with other substances like paper and hair and soil, and when this forms we say that the water molecules are adhesive, which means they're hydrogen bonding to other things, making water sticky to things like paper and hair and soil. Alright, here I'm showing you the hydrogen bonds in yellow. Okay, all this hydrogen bonding makes water do things that are important to biology. And one of the most important things that water can do is it can form a skin or possess something called surface tension, which holds droplets of water together against the force of gravity. And this tension can form a skin on the surface of water that some insects can actually walk on. I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. And it also makes water creep up the sides of tubes and form that curved surface you're probably all familiar with called a meniscus. The creeping of water up thin tubes or tubes inside of plant stems produces an effect called capillary action, which is how plants absorb water. So let's look at some pictures of this. Here's a picture of a penny with water drops added to it so that they mound up in this relatively large dome on the surface. Here's some water molecules showing surface tension on glass. Water will mound up into droplets. It won't lay flat. Here is an insect called a water strider, which is actually deforming the surface tension of the water with its little feet, but not breaking the surface tension. And here's a close-up of a glass tube with some water in it, showing the curved meniscus. And here's a picture showing capillary action. On the left side here we have a diagram showing a glass tube immersed in some blue water, and the blue water gets sucked up the tube partway. You can see this in living plant tissue. If you put food coloring in water and stick something like celery or a flower stem into the water, it will then suck the colored water up into the stems, and you can actually see the parts of the plant changing color. Okay, an example of capillary action, which is produced by a combination of adhesion and cohesive forces. Okay, water also has the property of being able to absorb an awful lot of heat before it turns into a gas or before it boils. And this means that large bodies of water are going to cool up, cool down, and warm up more slowly than other substances like land or rock or air. So this means that land located near oceans or large lakes experience milder climates than areas that are farther away from large bodies of water. This effect is called moderation. So oceans and lakes, large bodies of water, moderate climate. They make the summers less hot and the winters less cold. So let's take a closer look at that. So imagine a beach in Virginia in the spring moving into summer. On a nice warm day, the land and the air gets pretty warm, sometime up in the 90s. People are walking around in their bathing suits, having a good time, but you don't see them in the water because the water is too cold. The water has not had time to warm up yet. It hasn't been exposed to enough heat. But in the fall and winter, the land may get cool. You may be outside this time of year, like in November or December, and the air may be close to freezing, but the water at the beach may be very warm, in the 70s, because it hasn't had time to lose its heat. So this shows you that water warms and cools slowly. It tends to absorb a lot of heat before it boils, and it takes a long time for that heat to leave before it freezes. Very important property of water. Okay, this fact that water can absorb a lot of heat before it evaporates is used by animals to cool their bodies. For example, a human might produce sweat. As the sweat evaporates off your skin, it cools your skin down, which then cools your body down. Or animals may pant, like this dog. They're losing water from the surface of their lung tissue on the inside, but it's the same thing. As the water evaporates, it cools their bodies down. Very important for animals that are living in warmer climates. Okay, water also has the ability to dissolve many substances very well. Many things will dissolve or mix with water very easily. For example, food molecules, oxygen molecules, waste molecules, and carbon dioxide molecules. And this means that the water outside of cells, and if we use this green circle here to represent a cell, the water outside of cells contains all the dissolved goodies, the food and the oxygen that the cell is going to need to stay alive. And so the water inside the cell is then going to be accumulating the waste products like carbon dioxide and urea, the stuff that makes urine yellow, is going to be accumulating on the inside. So for a cell to stay balanced and stay alive, the food molecules and the oxygen have to move in, and the waste products have to get out. This happens because of water's ability to dissolve these substances. Okay, water also freezes, and when it freezes, it floats. This is really weird from a physics point of view because most solids are denser than their liquid form, so most solids will sink in a liquid, whereas water floats, ice floats in the liquid form of water. This is odd, and this is very good for aquatic ecosystems. Here we've got a picture of a pond that's been frozen over in the winter. The ice is thick enough to support the weight of this dog, but the animals underneath are safe. They're protected from the cold air above by this layer of ice, this floating ice, and the pond won't freeze solid. So you can think of the fact that ice floats as producing a shield that protects the water underneath from freezing. And this allows aquatic communities to make it through the winter. All the frogs, turtles, fish, salamanders, microorganisms living in the pond water under the ice don't freeze solid in the winter, and they can then survive until everything melts in the spring. All right, another thing about water that you need to be aware of is as you drink or consume water, it has to get into your blood, and this mainly happens in your colon, otherwise known as your large intestine. So as the food that you've consumed and the water that you've drank is mixed together and been digested, as it travels through your small intestine to your large intestine, it's making its way eventually into waste that's going to be leaving the body, obviously through the bottom here. But as it passes through the colon, it's being dried out. The main job of the colon is to absorb water from what's going to become waste, or the leftovers from digestion, and recycle that water in your body as body fluid or as the fluid in your blood. Okay? All the waste products that are dissolved in this water are then filtered out by the kidneys. Two very important waste products that our body has to get rid of are chemicals like urea and the salt, because we tend to consume much more salt than we actually need. These are filtered out by the kidneys. Okay, water also has a property called pH, and pH is simply a measurement of how acidic or basic a solution of water is. It's kind of like temperature, but we're not measuring heat, we're actually measuring something else. Water is a really good solvent. It dissolves just about everything to some degree, and the things that actually dissolve in water are called solutes. Now the pH scale goes from 14 to 0, and very strong acids are down close to 0. Weak acids are between 0 and 7. 7 is exactly neutral. It's neither acid or base. Weak bases are between 7 and about 10, 11. And really strong bases are down close to 14. The farther you get away from 7, the nastier, more caustic, more dangerous the chemical becomes. All right? So, pure distilled water has a pH of exactly 7, and most cells cannot survive at pHs very far from 7. Most cells can only live in pH between 6 and 8. This is the homeostatic region for human cells, for example, and it's where most plants and animal cells are most comfortable. Large changes or fast changes to pH can kill most cells. We like to think of this area between 6 and 8 as the life zone on the pH scale. Okay, acids are solutions, or excuse me, are solutes that release hydrogen ions when they're dissolved in water. And hydrogen ions are also known as protons. The symbol for them is H+. So hydrogen ions, the more there are in a solution, the lower the pH is. So as you increase the hydrogen ion concentration, you decrease the pH. Acids taste sour. Bases, on the other hand, are just the opposite. When you mix base chemicals with water, they release hydroxide ions, or OH- ions. And hydrogen ions raise the pH of solutions. Bases taste bitter. All right. Acids and bases, when you mix them together, neutralize each other because a hydrogen ion plus a hydroxide ion combined together will produce one water molecule, which of course has neutral pH. So they cancel each other out. Now the pH scale, some examples of some things that have a pH that you should know about. Chemical that has a very, very strong acidic quality is hydrochloric acid. Stomach acid, which includes hydrochloric acid, has a pH between 1 and 2. Vinegar, which a lot of people like to eat and put on salads and things, pH of about 3, maybe as low as 2. Rainwater, somewhere between 5 and 6, depending on how much pollution is in the air. Bases, on the other hand, seawater has a pH above 7, but usually not much past 8. Baking soda, commonly used to get rid of stomach acid. It's in Alka-Seltzer, pH of between 8 and 9. Windex, getting a little stronger, very common cleanser here, pH of between 9 and 10. Ammonia, a little bit stronger. And finally, drain cleaner, or lye, which is probably the strongest base that you may come into contact with. Nasty stuff. Don't want to get that in your eyes. Okay, our next part of the slideshow is going to talk about the large molecules that build living cells, and we're going to call them macromolecules, but you're going to have to wait to the next video cast for that.